Welcome everybody to this saphea tutorial. I'm Alessandro Sciullo from University of Turin, Italy. I'm a researcher in environmental sociology and political science. And in the framework of the saphea project, we have some colleagues here in Turin and all the other partners of the saphea project. We try to address what we call the societal challenge, the not technical challenges for DHC deployment. And in the next few minutes, I will try to give you a taste and also some practical information about the tools that we developed to address the societal dimension of the GeoDHC deployment. We mostly work on two main aspects of the not technical challenges and the not technical tools needed for an effective DHC deployment. And this tutorial will focus on the first of them, the part one about stakeholder analysis and engagement. In the following tutorials, we will focus on the societal witness. As for the stakeholder analysis and engagement, well, first of all, before going through the tools that we developed to implement the stakeholder analysis, it's always better to keep in mind and to highlight the relevance of engaging, identifying, and properly engaging stakeholders in any innovation processes, either policy, project, or other innovation processes. The reason of the relevance of the stakeholder engagement is mostly based on three. For what concerns the implementation processes, is mostly based on three main points. One is related to the definition of the problem and the policies or the project tools. It's important to get from the stakeholders and recipients of the innovation all the information needed to better frame the problem, because if we are not able to properly frame the problem, it's hard to find a solution. Then as for the implementation itself, it's important to engage stakeholder because a good and effective identification and engagement of the stakeholder might trigger an increase in the compliance or acceptance, compliance for policies, acceptance for projects among the citizens and stakeholders, must or could help in avoiding or for sure better managing conflicts that might raise from the innovation process, and as a whole way could increase for sure the active acceptance, that is not just not to complain, but is actually to accept and receive and implement and use the innovation. And then as for the output and outcomes, engaging stakeholders, it's important to define what could be the positive and negative socioeconomic and environmental impacts, and also for a more, let's say, fair and correct definition of the cost-benefit, say, balance. Stakeholders engagement means everything and nothing, and there's a lot of mantras about stakeholders engaging roaming around, but we can easily consider three main levels of stakeholders engagement. The first, the basic one, the entry level for stakeholder engagement, is informing stakeholders and citizens about the innovation, the project, or the policy. And the second level is about consultation. That means not just a one-way transmission of knowledge and information, but is to get from the citizen and stakeholders inputs to improve, refine the project or the policy. And the third, the higher level in terms of stakeholders engagement, is the decision, when the citizen themselves or the stakeholder themselves become part of the decision process. In saphea, how we try to address these challenges? Well, mostly by providing methodology and tools for the 3 steps for an effective stakeholders analysis, and that is about identification, description, and prioritization. We developed 2 main tools. One is a simple, easy to use Excel file and that automatically produced a diagram to categorize the stakeholders relevant for our project. And the two main tools are actually aimed at fulfilling three main objectives. That is, of course, the definition of the proper engagement strategies and also to support the identification of the proper messages in terms of communication, and also for the needs assessment. Who is a stakeholder? There is here a lot of literature that you are free to, in-depth have a look to the different references. But in short, for us in saphea, stakeholders is anybody who is somehow affected of could or can somehow affect the intervention, in our case, the project. So please keep in mind the three main steps: identification, description, or prioritization. As for the first, identification of stakeholder must be done keeping in mind the project characteristic and features. That means to keep in mind and to properly address, given an innovation project, in our case, the DHC deployment project, we need to have good knowledge and in-depth knowledge about what is the process at stake, what are the expected outcomes, what are the risks for the project. And here we developed an easy-to-use guideline where we identify some guiding questions in order for this process outcome and risk to be properly addressed by the users. So you can take this simple scheme of questions, and by answering your question, you should be able to define all the features of your project that are relevant to identify stakeholders. The second step, once you have perfectly in mind all the aspects and the features of your project, of your innovation, you must keep in mind the implementation chain of your project. Implementation means the process that brings the innovation from the very first step of the inception to the very last step of the impacts. So here are and it's another group of questions that we develop and identify based on a big amount of literature and other case studies that identify guiding questions to help you in defining all the critical aspects all along the implementation chain. Again, you find always a who as the first word of this question. Why? Because almost all of this question put you in the condition of identifying possible relevant stakeholder. Who are the project planners? Who provided the license to operate? Who are the investors? Etc. Etc. Any answer is in a way corresponds to the identification of a relevant stakeholder. Once you have identified, going through our, let's say, guiding questions, a list or even disordered list of stakeholders, because the first is just to be able to identify as many stakeholders or actors you are able to. The third step for the identification of the stakeholders is to assign the different stakeholder to a specific typo. And here you find here typology, the most common typology. Each and every stakeholder might belong at least to one of these categories. Of course, some of them could belong to more than one. One engineer is at the same time also a citizen, and so on. It's important to assign category to the stakeholder because based on the categorization, we can define specific engagement strategies and specific information strategy. Then let's move to the second and then to the end. The stakeholder description. After having identified who they are, we need to describe how they are in a way made for what concerns some aspects that are relevant to be kept in mind when it comes to engaging. What kind of actor, why they are interested, how much power do they actually have, to what extent they are interested in the policy, how much they are concerned. Again, here you find guiding questions to go through this big objective. Again, based on the literature in the field, we identified 6 main features that must be considered for having a good description of the stakeholder. For each of these categories, you find in the deliverable, but of course also in this presentation, again, a few explanation and guiding questions that should help you in identifying, here is the example for the impact, to what extent is each stakeholder might be impacted from, affected positively or negatively by the project. It's important because depending on the level of the impact, you will have stakeholders that must or should be involved at a certain degree. And the same for the other categories. Now, we don't have time, of course, to go through all of them, but you find in the deliverable, in the slides, all the guiding questions that might help you in addressing the different features. In practical terms, all these features are reported in an Excel file that is provided jointly with the deliverable. Well, you can easily just fill in a table with the stakeholder and the different features. From these features and the characteristics and the score that you will be able to assign to the different characteristic, this categorization will be automatically produced. This is again a well-established categorization of stakeholder based on the degree of relevance that they might have in affecting the project. It's based on the consideration of how much power do they have, how much they could be interested, and by crossing these two dimensions, we are able to identify 4 different categories of stakeholders. The key players are the ones that we must always keep involved. The context setter are the actors that might affect but are not that much interested, but still could make a difference if they decide to obstacle or to enable or support the process. The subjects are the ones that are not very powerful, but are really strongly affected. And here is the source of resistance against the project. And then the crowd is the almost always the wider group, the larger group that is made up of people and actors that are not very powerful, not even interested, but always to be kept under consideration. This is to conclude the case study, the Excel file filled in by our colleagues from Poland for a case study of GeoDHC implementation in Krakow. And as you can see here is just the list of the stakeholder, and here are all the categories and the features that we quickly presented before. So by using our tool, you will be able easily to just fill in this Excel file with your thoughts about the different categories and features, sorry. And then you are asked to assign to the power and interest dimension score that will produce and automatically produce this categorization of stakeholder. Here is the list of the stakeholder just represented by the ID, but please trust me that they are the stakeholder for the Polish case study. That's all, and let's keep in touch, and you find in the deliverable 5.2 all the detailed information about this tool. That's all about the stakeholder analysis tools that we developed in saphea, and you find in the description of the tutorials all the links to the supplementary materials.